heavy in the rear tables? We're good. So, thank you for having me here. As is my way, I want to take a moment and say thank you to a few different people. Number one, thank you to God. I think without Christ, if we don't begin there, I think we're missing the boat. So I always begin by saying thank you to Christ for everything he's given me. I also thank my parents. Without my parents making the decision to immigrate here in the late 1950s, I really would not have had any of the opportunities in Mexico that I've had here in the United States of America. The third thanks is to the United States of America for the most incredible opportunities I could have ever imagined. And lastly, I give thanks to the United States Army. So, no bar fights. Yeah. So to begin, I was thinking about this presentation, and I thought, wow, I've worked with the new Iraqi army back in the day when 20% of them were still insurgents who wanted to end us, and whenever you worked with them, you had your M4 locked and loaded with the safety off, for those of you who remember those days. I worked with the Afghan National Army, again, when some were Taliban, some were even Al-Qaeda. So I thought, wow, how am I gonna speak to this crowd? Because we've got veterans, we have faculty and staff, and we have JROTC. And I'll tell you, this is a challenge. So here's a message I want to give to each group. First, to the faculty and staff. The Soviet Army, the Russian Army, they have a ratio of 5 soldiers on the front line to every 1 support staff. 5 to 1. 5 war fighters, 1 support. That is the classic, you are cannon fodder. So you go forward, if you win, you win. If you get injured or die, you're out of luck. Russia does that today, even as I speak. The United States Army and our allies who take after our motto, we have the exact opposite ratio. We have 5 support staff to every frontline warfighter. Right? We are the only military who started that motto, and to this day, that's our motto. So the message to the faculty and staff is, without your support to our veterans, and without your support to the next generation of warfighter, the JROTC students here, the country would literally fall. You may not see it immediately, but if you didn't do what you do each day, if you did not do your daily grind of support for our veterans and for the next generation of warfighters, our country would eventually fall. So for you, thank you for what you do. One more thing to be said about that. And when I was growing up in Baldwin Park, never did I think that I'd get out of Baldwin Park. If I shared all the times I got beat up, whether it was east side, north side, it just was an endless experience of getting beat up. But I was determined to go forward. And eventually I made it to St. John's and Bosco Tech. But really the point is, to the faculty and staff and to the JROTC students, after high school, I had no mentoring in high school. So I attended Rio Hondo Community College, 1981, fall of 81. And my observation was sex, drugs, disco. I was okay with the disco. That's my era. I am a fan of the Bee Gees. Very proud of it. But when you see people are not focused on going forward in education, they're focused on the sex and the drugs, they're wrong. So I immediately transferred to Mount Sac, spring of '82. And once again, my observation was sex, drugs, rock and roll. I was okay with that, with the rock and roll, but at the time, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, because I wasn't a fan of Led Zeppelin then, as I am now. But again, people were going on the wrong path. And out of desperation, I applied to University of Laverne, and they accepted me. I wish then that I knew about Azusa Pacific University and other Christian or Catholic universities. But at the time, I didn't have any mentoring. So the message to the faculty is, thank you for what you do. It is sorely needed in this world. The message to the JROTC students, you're in a wonderful place. Keep going forward. If you can be accepted to a university like APU, go. Go and go. And without being condescending, you will be making the best decision of your life, but you're just too young to realize that it's the best decision of your life. So, moving on to the next point, to our veterans. You are in that 2% of Americans who raise your hand. You're in that less than 2% of Americans who deployed. You're here because you received an honorable discharge. You did something right to serve our country. If you're like me and you have multiple deployments to theater of war, you have lost friends on every single deployment. So I encourage you, focus on healing from what you've experienced, and always have that pride of what you've given to our country. You're in a wonderful place because you're in a Christ-centered university. Heal and go forward. And my big message to you is, with the gifts that you bring to the table, once you have your degree, you're literally gold in the civilian workplace. Literally. Even now, for what I do in criminal evaluations for the courts, I'm the one repeatedly calling the attorneys for updates on what they need. I'm the one who tends to be the assertive one, where in the Army, it'd be normal. So go forward, and again, value the gifts that you have, value the memories that no one will ever be able to take away. So lastly, JROTC students. So Dr. Casas' view on JROTC. Every single class, including ROTC, now that I'm brainstorming this out loud, as part of your final exam in the spring quarter of your final year of high school or college, day 1, you fly to Gettysburg. Day 2, you're in the museum all day long, because it'll take you an entire day to go through that museum and study it. Day 3, you're on the battlefield, walking the battlefield. Day 4, you fly home. You have the greatest country on the planet in the history of world history. And it is shocking to me that most Americans don't understand that. You know, my oldest son, and the reason you youngsters may want to listen to me, my oldest son graduates from the United States Naval Academy this coming May. So, as a single dad, but thank you, but let me challenge you. It's not about what Antonio's doing right as a single dad for many, many years. It's about you being the future. And me trying to show you that I have some sort of credibility and I understand your challenges. My youngest son is a Damien, and he's smarter than his older brother. But I want to encourage you, do these things. go to Gettysburg. Have you learned in your JROTC classes like the top 10 battles in world history? Whenever I go to Chick-fil-A with my 17-year-old in tow, no matter who's behind the counter, I ask them, tell me everything you know about the Bataan Death March. And they stare at me like I'm an alien. I ask them, tell me everything you know about Gettysburg, Trafalgar, Midway, Austerlitz, Waterloo, Sitting Bull defeating Custer. And they literally don't know any of this. Our education system in this country, not only is it overtly anti-Christian, but it's overtly anti-American. And so my challenge to the JROTC students here is, you want to learn these things. You know, for whatever reason, I wanted to bring the Gettysburg Address this afternoon. It was given on November 19th of 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln. And we're in an era where there's so much polarization that the infighting amongst Americans, I've just never seen it this bad. And yet, these 272 words that President Lincoln shared, you know, were the most unifying remarks of that era, and I would argue of our era. So the final message for the JROTC students is, show that motivation. If you look at the brief CV that I wrote, the reason an Army guy got to go hang out at the FBI for a year with the behavioral science unit, I kept raising my hand and showing that I was motivated, committed, determined. The reason I got to go hang out at the National Security Agency for a year, same reason. And the one that's not in the brochure, the one you should all Google, Site R, S-I-T-E space R. That one, I do that one again in a heartbeat, but it's so classified that the only reason people know about it is because somehow the New York Times put on the top 10 places that Russia would hit if we got into a nuclear war, and Site R was named, and so people are thinking, what's Site R? Wonderful thing. I would never think as a kid growing up in Baldwin Park that I'd be hanging out at the FBI, National Security Agency, or Site R. I never thought I'd be a commander. I never thought I'd be a colonel. So my message to you is, you know, continue. If you want to be enlisted in an NCO, wonderful careers. My challenge is for one of you to rise to the rank of Command Sergeant Major of the Army and be there with the Chief of Staff. If you want to go the officer route, my challenge to you is that one of you in 30 years is speaking here with a star on your shoulders. That is the idea that I'm planting in your minds right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.